Hello, Francis, I'm home! My wife shouted cheerfully from the threshold, returning from the office. We both work at the same university. She works in the property management department of the university, and I work in the physics department. I'm in the kitchen, I responded without much enthusiasm. What are you doing at home so far? Her question hung in the air, and her voice faltered when she saw my suitcases standing near the inner door, leading to our attached garage. Her head slowly turned towards me, and she looked at me, puzzled. What's happening? Followed the question. Are you going somewhere? Seems like a lot of baggage for a last-minute conference. She tried to joke. Oddly enough, I began with a shrug. In all the time I've been lecturing on quantum mechanics, this seems to be the first time I've actually brought my work home. Oh, really? I waved my hand theatrically. I checked students' work, conducted training sessions via Zoom, but real damn quantum theory, no, this is my first time. Obviously, she seemed unpleasantly surprised by the degree of venom and the actual rude nature of my words. Look, I don't understand what you mean and why you use such expressions. What does quantum mechanics have to do with this? Anything. I rolled my eyes and stared at her in mock horror. What does it have to do with anything? I repeated. Yes, the most direct. Quantum mechanics literally explains how everything works, from your cell phone to your very body, and in general, everything in this world. Do you remember how I explained to you the paradox of Schrödinger's cat 1? My sudden change of topic took her by surprise. She hesitated for a moment, trying to remember what I had once explained to her, and then answered. Yeah. It seems like something about a cat inside a box, right? Since you can't interact with the cat, you have to make assumptions about whether it's alive or dead there. So, from a physics perspective, you're saying he's both, more or less, until you open the box and find out. Very good, I praised her. We call this strange state superposition. What is quantum entanglement? She pursed her lips and shook her head. I remember that you mentioned this when I asked about quantum computers, but I forgot what it was about. And anyway, it didn't make sense to me. Listen, why are we talking about this now? What does all this have to do with your luggage? I leaned back in my chair, pointing with an inviting gesture to the one who stood on the opposite side of the table. She came and sat down opposite. In my laboratory, I announced, we have a device that creates entangled electrons in a state of superposition. Both electrons can be in either of the two states, or even both at the same time, but as soon as we start testing one of them to determine its state, the other instantly loses its superposition. Somehow measuring state A affects state B. Even now, this explanation amused me, and I couldn't help but smile. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. Carol, my wife, just stared at me blankly, probably wondering why on earth I was talking about such complex and incomprehensible matters to her. Baggage? Losing patience, she reminded me. I'm just getting there, I barked at her. Immediately straightening up, she staggered back in shock. Then I continued my explanation. When you and I got married, our lives were intertwined. Your condition affected mine, and vice versa, right? I saw the color begin to fade from her cheeks. Yes, but, she muttered. Let me finish my explanation in my own way, please, I interrupted her. She leaned back in her chair, looking far from happy. I calmly continued. So, if we consider my marital status in purely quantum mechanical terms, then I am an entangled particle in a state of superposition, and depending largely on your actions, my position will instantly shift into one of two states. Carol, not at all in a superposition at the moment, but in complete confusion, shook her head again in despair. I don't understand. What actions? What's the position? What the hell are these conditions? I relented. It's simple. If you are the unfaithful woman I think you are, I pushed the bulky envelope across the table towards her, then I am a single man who will soon be divorced. On the other hand, I continued, if you can explain that one phone conversation you had over lunch today, Well, then I'm a creepy husband who will unpack those suitcases over there and invite you to dinner to apologize." I narrowed my eyes and glared at her across the kitchen table. Carol first stared at the envelope, as if at a poisonous snake that was within striking distance of her, and then, nevertheless, turned her gaze to me. "Tomorrow you are leaving for your annual conference? On Valentine's Day? This will be our first separation in the 6 years since we started living together, and in the 4 years since we officially became husband and wife," I continued. I saw her swallow nervously, and her eyes darted to the side for a moment. "I called the conference hotel to order a bouquet of roses to be delivered to your room. You know, a wonderful romantic gift for my loving wife." Carol shifted uncomfortably, turning a little, as if it was difficult and uncomfortable for her to sit upright. "Only the lady at the front desk naively assumed that I was the same man with whom you shared your room, and then complimented me, saying that the flowers were a wonderful gesture and that she would, I quote, personally take care of it. To have the bouquet delivered to your room as a surprise while you are both in the conference room." Carol stammered and tried to mumble something that sounded like some kind of plausible explanation. I raised my hand, interrupting her bleating, and half-questioningly stated, "Obviously, you and Craig are located in room 238. As usual, right?" She sat silently, staring at her hands and nervously twirling the rings on her finger, obviously not wanting to be the first to speak. "Well, what about Craig?" I had to push her. Carol's voice was even as she answered, "We studied at university together. We had several dates, we even slept a couple of times, but there was no real spark between us, just regular sex." "How long ago?" I said briefly. She sighed heavily. "At a conference 4 years ago. I was surprised when I saw him there. He started working in a similar position at a housing association, and, by coincidence, our paths crossed." Now she looked at me seriously. There was no pre-planning or collusion. At least believe this, if you don't believe the rest. Then she looked back down at her hands, which lay limply on the table. We sat next to each other during the afternoon classes, and in the evening we went for drinks to catch up. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. We drank a little and started flirting, and then I went back to his room for coffee, and here she raised her wetly shining eyes, and at least she had the courage to meet my gaze. "And I stayed the night." Carol sniffled and wiped her eyes. I, still leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms over my chest, did not add anything to her confession. "I recently got married," she said, "and he was engaged. We both felt guilty, but we decided that if you never found out, no one would get hurt." At this point, I intervened. "There's a chance that if you had confessed to me then, I might have forgiven you. I'm not sure about this, but there was such a chance. But this year, on fucking Valentine's Day?" She bit her lip miserably and nodded. "The next year we had separate rooms, but the excitement of this secret meeting, just once a year, was too great to resist, and we slept together again. Last year, I booked a standard room. They always have doubles, and he transferred the additional payment for accommodation from his card. This year was supposed to be the last. Craig's wife just told him she's pregnant, and you and I have been talking about starting a family, so..." Her quiet voice broke, and Carol's eyes filled with tears again. She looked at me, apparently hoping that what she said would in some incredible way soften her treachery. I was about to put her in her place when suddenly her phone rang. She reached into her bag to cancel the call until she fished out the beeping gadget and saw who was trying to contact her. Carol's eyes widened in surprise. "This is Craig," she sniffed. He knows that he shouldn't call me when I'm at home. What we did with him was only at the conference, and we never laughed at you or his wife. It was just meaningless sex. We never called each other," she repeated with confusion. "Perhaps he is trying to warn you about what I already know about you," I suggested. "But how does he know this?" she asked, but then hesitated. She caught her breath as realization hit her mind. Did you tell his wife?" she whispered in horror, having previously managed to press the cancel call button. I nodded affirmatively. Yes, Jenna and I had quite a long conversation this afternoon. Obviously, starting a family should have meant the end of his little adventures on the side. It seems that my information was the last straw for her. In fact, when we talked, she was talking about ending the relationship. Jenna has no intention of becoming a single mother. How did you find her? She asked quietly. Very simple. I told the receptionist that I planned to order champagne for my table given that it was Valentine's Day, but I wasn't sure which card to charge for this surprise. I was offered a choice, a corporate card in your name or the name of a certain Mr. Dutton. I told them I would make a decision later and hung up. Searching by name in the online list of conference delegates took only a few moments. Then, after checking his Facebook profile, I discovered Craig Dutton with Jenna as his significant other. Once I saw that he studied at the same university and at the same time as you, I was sure that I had hit the bull's eye. I texted Jenna immediately. She called me, and we shared our suffering. Carol's phone buzzed again. She looked at me questioningly. Come on, I encouraged her, grinning. Answer. She pressed receive, and with a quick glance in my direction, turned on the speakerphone. What do you need, Craig? She asked in a colorless, almost tired voice. You know we don't do that. It's urgent, Kaz. His voice came over the phone as Carol winced when she heard him call her by a nickname she hated. His spy whisper, amplified by the speaker, echoed throughout our kitchen. Listen, Jenna knows about our agreement. She even mentioned your husband by name, but damn, I don't understand how she could know about that. Carol wiggled her eyebrows in pain, daring me to come to her aid. But that was her own shitty problem that she had to deal with herself. Probably because he was the one who told her about us, she sighed gloomily. How? Where? What does he know? He demanded details. Can we come up with an explanation they can swallow? I doubt it very much, my wife chuckled, considering that I just told him everything. As Carol spoke, she watched as I began typing a message on my phone. In fact, she continued rather insightfully, I'm almost sure that he's currently texting Jenna with the latest news. Ooh! This time, throwing caution and a conspiratorial tone aside, he shouted into the phone. Did you confess to him? She just shrugged, although her lover could not see her. He found out about you and me when he tried to do something nice to show his love for me on Valentine's Day. She looked at me with aching melancholy in her eyes. I know that he will never trust me again, and I am sure that everything is over between us. So I thought he deserved this last gesture of respect before he left me. I passed the test and resolved his superposition. She explained the current situation. Understandable to me, but completely ineffective for her ignorant lover. Carol ended the call, although a stunned Craig was still mumbling nonsense in confusion. She pointed her finger at the screen several times, and then looked up at me and, shrugging her shoulders, explained, I blocked him. Not that it means that much to you now, but I thought you should know. He could never replace you. Just stupid, non-committal entertainment on a boring evening spent alone in a hotel away from home. She stood up, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked at the envelope left on her side of the table. I'll help you get to the car, she said quietly, resigned to the inevitable. As we carried my suitcases to the garage, I thought that if I had not tried to show Carol my love for her on Valentine's Day, their romance might have ended on its own, and I would never have known anything. It was then that I remembered another law that governs the universe. No good deed ever goes unpunished. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.